I'm a security guard hired to protect an estate. The forest has eyes. Part 11. Written by The Forest Has Eyes. Fubar. That's a term my old bitter squad leader told me when we were pinned down on a thin road back in Kandahar. This was when I was just a private, barely my first chevron. Crouched behind an armored vehicle as my team leader laid between us with a tourniquet strapped to his arm. "Fucked up beyond actual repair, Nolan," he said. You know, I've hit a lot of situations so far that can be classified like that. Here, mostly in this semi-southern woodland town, having taken a contract in hopes of seeing some work. I guess I never expected my blood to be pumping its highest in my 30s, and at a time when bullets had stopped flying past my head. I remember nearly falling back over my computer chair when the lights went out, bathing us in darkness. Now, normally, your eyes have a natural cat-eye ability to them, where they'll adjust to darkness. Usually it's helped by ambient light. That's how, after a blackout, you're able to quickly get a sense of where you are. But considering I stood there, gazing around, not even able to find my own hand, there was no light. Not anymore. Fubar. This wasn't the time to panic, not now. We were in an Alamo situation. The compound has been severely breached, and whatever could be classified as an enemy combatant was now probably within the walls, lurking, hunting. I opened the middle drawer. Right side, it had matches, lithium batteries, AA's, AAA's, and a headlamp. If you can't see, you can't fight. I flicked it onto the white light setting and glanced around. The pit in my stomach started to decrease a bit. At least now we had light. "Oh shit!" Isaac's words bounced off the walls of the small room as he stumbled and fell onto his tent inside the office, quickly reminding me that we still weren't a fully professional fighting force. Isaac threw the plastic lining off of him as I scanned behind me, and I breathed a sigh of relief. My plate carrier and 15 were still there, propped up against the wall. I slipped the lamp onto my head, pulling the vest over my head and strapping it onto myself. Isaac grumbled as he stood up. "This is bad, man," he said. Yeah, it was. I felt around the backside of my jeans, feeling a small ring of keys I'd kept clipped onto a belt loop. I pulled off a small master lock key. "Isaac, pop open that crate," I said as I tossed him the key. I was referring to one of the tough boxes propped up beside where his tent once stood. I saw him hold it in his hand, feeling it with his fingertips. "Busting out the big guns, huh, Sarge?" he said. Yeah, something like that. It's a good thing that Isaac spent all $17,000 on pure, unadulterated American firepower that day, oh so many weeks ago. Right now, we were trapped in a small security room, while God knows what could have already secured most of the compound, let alone the dark, close-quarters building we were in. We had a term back on small J camps. I already mentioned it. Alamo. In the event of a breach of the compound, we would retreat to the deepest, most secure part of our fortifications. We would load up and hold out. That's probably what they wanted. Us to stay here, to wait out the storm, while they gathered strength outside, waiting to drown Isaac and I in whatever darkness they currently had rose in. No, not today. We had come too far, fought too hard, for it to all end like that. I filled whatever magazines we hadn't with all the surplus 5.56, shoving them into pouches on my kit in my pockets. I even went old school and clipped on a Condor gun belt. Isaac's carrier was outside on the couch in the living room, along with his Bellini death cannon. In another time, I probably would have given him all kinds of hell for leaving his weapon out. But that's when I was a pit bull, about 10 years younger, and hadn't worn down my temper like I had my knees. This also wasn't a trained American soldier we were talking about, although that just sounds rude. Isaac might not be trained. He might not even know how to fight well, but he has stood by my side and fought with me so far. "What do you got for me?" Isaac asked giddily as he pulled on a gun belt of his own. It was lined with pouches upon pouches of 12 gauge. Buckshot, slugs, with an additional pouch strapped to the very back, marked in red and black. I tossed him a short-barreled member of the shotgun family, the Mossberg 590. It was stocky, to the point. It might not have had range, but I kept it here with the express purpose of being able to fight in the tight corridors of the house. And it sure was needed now more than ever. I slung to my front as Isaac loaded a handful of slugs into the Mossberg and tried for the door. Locked. I tried it from our side, but it wasn't budging. Not good. I backed up, taking aim at the door. "You ready?" I asked Isaac, and he nodded. I tapped the upside of my fist against my head, to Isaac's confusion. You got a headache?" I sighed. Though I really shouldn't have. I should have known better. "Breach," I said. "What?" he asked. I said it means breach. "With what?" "The 12 gauge boomstick in your hand. Now put it against the lock and blow it," I told him. All of the action movies he must have seen probably came flooding back because Isaac ran forward, shoving the muzzle of the gun against the door. With an explosion of sparks and wooden fragments, I saw the brass cover of the door's knob and lock fall off. Thankfully, this time, I had put on a pair of electronic ear protectors. The third time's the charm. Isaac pulled the door open and I went charging forwards. The hallway opened into a T, so I had to go and cover the living room while Isaac… Wait, this wasn't the hallway. My headlamp illuminated the area and I saw what it really opened up into. Something that made me groan with pure dread. It was a library. The library that Isaac and I had stumbled into on our last adventure into this haunted house. The same rectangular design, the same dim orange candelabras lining each of the corners, the same dust-filled air that hung like a light snowfall. As I dropped my muzzle, Isaac came rushing in behind me, shaking the ground so wildly that it telegraphed every one of his steps. "All right, let's… this again?" he said. He took the words right out of my mouth. I reached up and pulled my left muff off my ear ever so slightly, allowing me to hear the natural sounds around us. Isaac and I were staring down either end of one of the aisles alongside the library's longer side. And I don't know whether it was the walls or the dust, but all sound seemed muffled. Like there was no ambient noise, just a pure void, where either Isaac's or my own shuffling and breathing broke it. I don't think we ever solved our basement problem, Dwight." "Oh, yeah, you think?" I told him. "Now the whole house is gone." My left hand shot back down to the foregrip on my rifle as I scanned in front of me. Normally, with a proper team, I'd have this entire room cleared by now. But we weren't a proper team. It was just us, and we stood there, complacent, waiting. We stood there like two goats waiting to get cut down. "What's the play?" Isaac asked. He now backed up, pressing up to the back of my kit. What was the play? I thought about it, my cheek welded to the buttstock. There were no sounds, which indicated we were alone. But were we? Did the ghouls and creatures hunting us create sound here? Was the lack of sound just high blood pressure messing with our eardrums? Was it at all detrimental in a combat situation? My mind rushed to these menial questions. Yes, but no, not unnatural. Then that's when we heard it. Up the aisle to my right, just behind the bookcase, I could hear a set of heavy and fast footsteps, cutting the trail from Isaac's inn to mine. I didn't know what it was, who it was. It could have been Roseanne, but all I know is it was coming towards the opening near me, fast. One flick downwards, selecting Simi. With quick, calculated precision, I took aim for a spot on the bookcase that I knew it was at, and I slammed down on the trigger. All of the training I had acquired suddenly flooded back as I fired into the bookcase in large, fast groups, tearing up the novels and dictionaries and whatever else was on the shelf. Isaac joined in. Spinning around, he fired off a slug that cut right through a wooden divider, causing the entire shelf to sag in the middle. Then there was silence. I peered over my holographic sight, peering into the now settling fall of torn-up paper and wooden shards. Through my right ear, I could hear Isaac breathing heavily. A metal clink told me that he had slam-fired all his ammo, and the clicking afterwards told me that he was reloading. My left ear was ringing. I guess I had forgotten to put that muff back over my ear before I decided to light up the shelf like it was a tango at 3 o'clock. I mean, in this circumstance, I guess it was regardless. Isaac slammed his shotgun's fore-end home, scanning the shelf up and down. "You think we got it?" he asked. "If we didn't, Isaac, we've got bigger problems. Cover me," I told him. I pied the corner of the shelf as I approached, using whatever was left of the end of it to provide a slow but steady cover point that I was able to clear it from. My mind raced as to what might greet me. The creature from the backyard, back to seek its revenge. John? Roseanne. As I rounded the corner, quickly clearing all openings, the ball in my throat cleared. "Dwight, what is it? See anything?" My throat cleared with a frustrated sigh. "No, nothing." Suddenly, we heard another set of footsteps, this time on Isaac's side, running along the short side of the rectangle. Isaac was the first to fire. Through the dim light of the library, I could see an explosion, and a slug ripped through 2 shelves as it hit the far wall. As paper and leatherback covers of books flew across the room, I squinted to see what it was. I saw something, someone, a humanoid, small, running. It was too dark, the air was too polluted. I couldn't see who, but I saw something that gave me enough reason to pick up and run to the far end to beat it. I remember trying to yell at it, as if whatever was in the woods gave a rat's ass about my word or once. "Stop!" I screamed. As I hit the far aisle, I pivoted on my right foot and raised my rifle, only to be staring down at Isaac, who held the Mossberg at his hips. Isaac dipped his gun back, holding the barrel in the air. What was going on? I scanned both sides of the aisle, and that's when I saw it. Embedded in a spot where another bookcase should be was a wooden door. Plywood with old yellow paint peeling off at its edges. I pied the 3-inch indent it made, as if something were to be hiding there waiting to kill me. It was probably just nerves. Isaac shook his head. "I guess there's no hope of seeing any of the regular house now," he said. I shook my head, reaching in with my offhand. "Not unless we keep going. I guess that's the play." Was what I was saying even making sense? Did any of this make sense? Everything was spiraling out of control. Was what we were seeing, shooting, running through, even real? I tried to believe it was. If anything, just to keep myself grounded. Locked. The door was locked. I backed off, shouldering my rifle. I tapped the front side of my head again, and this time Isaac came in close with his shotgun. Another explosion of wood and metal shards, and the door shook wildly. This time I didn't wait for him to pull it open. I charged forward, raising my boot and kicking the door in. Isaac followed close behind, and both him and I nearly tripped over a small, long, pink piece of furniture that laid across just in front of the door. A bed, a child's bed. Age, like the chipped walls where it seemed like blue and white wallpaper were once plastered across, had sunk in. A white and pink quilt was now old, torn up, and rotted. The room was also as small as the security room, maybe a couple of meters longer, a few across. I pulled my rifle up against me, backing up to gain space. That's when my back hit a wall. The wall. The door we had come through was no longer there. Just more peeling wallpaper with chipped wood furnishings. There was no going back. I instead brought my left foot to the edge of the bed, feeling the frame, and kicked it against the wall to my left, out of the way. The bed must have collided with some sort of dresser, because I noticed a wave of papers flew off into the center of the room. Out of my peripheral vision, I noticed they were drawings, colorful ones. I walked up to the far side of the room. There was a window. Turning off my headlamp to avoid any glare or reflection, I gazed out. It was darkness. The void. Maybe 1 or 2 inches of space. And then it seemed like it hid in a sea of literal, physical darkness. No trees, lights, ghouls, monsters, people. Just darkness. The sounds of objects falling onto the wooden floor caused me to spin around, and I saw it was just Isaac. But something was off. "Isaac, you all right?" I asked. He stood there shaking his head, and he had this glassy look in his eyes. Yeah, man, just..." His right hand holding his gun dropped as his left hand pinched his temple. "It's gotta all be this stuff in the air. I think it's giving me a headache." He took a few steps forward, nearly slipping on one of the papers on the floor, causing him to brace against the wall. "What is all this stuff anyways?" Something also clicked in my head. A few seconds ago, one of the drawings fell right across the light of my headlamp. It was colorful, fresh, new, like someone had just gone to town drawing it. It was unlike the walls and furniture where the colors were faded and old, and looked like they'd been through the Dark Age. I pulled my rifle into its workspace, close to my shoulder with the muzzle in the air, and I grabbed one of the drawings. It was off, strange, surreal, I guess. A small girl in a white and pink dress was in a field, surrounded by trees. A blue sky messedly colored in above, with flowers on the ground. Although it seemed intentional, the edge of the trees were curved, a clearing, and a house stood tall in the background, several pointed edges to its rooftops. I tossed it aside and picked up another, this time a much darker version of the forest. Trees devoid of leaves with dark gray bark filled the area. In the distance, bathed in light, was the Cazamoth Estate. I knew it was because it was a spitting image of it. A gray concrete wall with curled barbed wire, and a large brown wooden building in the middle. Though, at the edges of the trees, in the dark patches, eyes watched. Not cartoonishly red or evil eyes. No, plain, white eyes with no irises, surrounded by dark patches of dead skin, staring down from all angles. The eyes I knew. I had seen them in the storm. Whatever drew this knew what was going on and wanted me to see them. I felt a drop of sweat run down the side of my head as a chill shot up my spine. Was it from all the running and gunning? Probably yes, but I have to admit, this was all getting under my skin. The sweat on my hand sunk into the paper as I turned it over. There was another drawing. It was us. The gang. The small trio that I had assembled in the parking lot just before we pulled out this morning. Or yesterday morning. Was it even the same day? Forget about it. Roseanne sat inside, while I leaned on the front bumper, smoking a cigarette, and Isaac sat up against the rear bumper, head down. They were exactly like portraits of us, albeit drawn in crayon. Me, beard, black hair, leather jacket, and jeans. Roseanne, purple beanie, white coat, green hardback journal. And Isaac, trucker's flex cap, Hawaiian shirt, cargo pants, and… no, some sort of dark strand coming out of his back. The black Crayola line edged deep into the paper, intently as it led back to the woods. I dropped the paper and stood up, flipping on my headlamp as I gazed at Isaac. His head was hung low, his breathing heavy, slight shivers in his shoulder as he leaned up against a shelf, his right hand barely hanging on to the pistol grip of the Mossberg. "Isaac?" I asked. There was no response. "Isaac!" My voice shook a bit, my thumb plastered against the selector switch. As I waited, praying what my gut told me was going on wasn't going on. "Isaac, you better come clean right now, if that ain't a headache or flu." A series of heavy pants and coughs came from him. His head still hung low, obscuring his eyes. I took a step forward. A large impact into the window behind me caused me to spin around. Something had hit the window from within that dark void, and it had caused a large break in the glass to form. I aimed my rifle at the window. Now, there were two threats. one external and one internal. And God, don't let the internal one be true. Another thud from an unseeable force caused the glass to crack, the spider web break widening even more. "Isaac, we need to go!" I screamed. He just stood there, now shivering. Great, just great, Dwight, I thought. I gazed around. The door we had entered from was gone. The window was now becoming a breach point for something else. Then, in the back left corner, I noticed a door that, for some reason, I didn't see in my initial sweep of the room. It had just appeared. A large toy box lid was in front of it, with a chair propped up beside it in an attempt to hide it. I let my rifle drop. It slung to my front as I grabbed the box, and I heaved it to the other side of the room. I tried the handle. It was locked. I raced over to Isaac, reaching for his shotgun, except his previously limp and sweaty fingers now clung to the trigger well, like it was a pot of gold. He stood there, still, head down, sickly, but he wouldn't let go. I cursed under my breath and reached for a drop holster on my right leg. My Glock 19 wasn't a preferable breaching tool, but under the current circumstances, it would have to do. I shoved the barrel to the keyhole before yanking on that trigger more times than I can count. The door shuddered and shook, but after enough shots and yanking on the handle, the bolt inside broke and I pushed it open. There was another impact, followed by the sound of glass falling onto the wooden floor. It caused my hairs to stand up at attention. I grabbed Isaac by his shoulder and pulled him after me. "Isaac, we are leaving!" As I shoved him into the hall and reached the door, the sound of glass shattering, followed by a horrifying growl and roar, caused me to kick the door back into place. Isaac began to mutter at this point, hysterically, as I nearly pulled a muscle, shoving a gigantic cabinet in front of the door. Just as it eclipsed the door to the bedroom, it shook violently. More growls and roars like before emanated from within. This wasn't the Cazamoth Estate. We weren't the protectors. This wasn't our home. We were being hunted. I pulled Isaac along with my free arm as he now began to sound like an asylum patient. The hallway was old, weathered, like a Victorian-style house had been put through 70 years and 2 hurricanes. The rugs and floorboards were torn up, plaster littered the floor, and all of the doors were locked, except one, labeled Infirmary. I shoved Isaac inside as I swung the door closed. It had 6 locks. Why do you even need so many? Why, for an aid room? No infirmary I'd ever seen had needed that many. I turned back to the room in front of me. It was probably 7 meters across, just big enough for some cabinets, a sink, counters, and a metal operating table along the far wall. It's important to note that the room was split. The bottom half, along with the entirety of the floor, was littered with old, cracked tiles like you would find in a shower. The top was white paint that had seen better days. I looked around for Isaac, who now sat in one of the back corners, hands grabbing his face, sobbing hysterically. Something deep down inside sunk from seeing this. For a person who had been so chipper, so positive throughout all of this, especially after that pep talk we had had in the kitchen, he was crumbling to this. I smothered the feeling. He would be fine, if he was even fine to begin with. I went through my basic checks. All my mags and gear were still on me. The door was secure. The loud, drumming sounds of the bedroom door down the hall told me that something was still trying to get in. Isaac was a possible threat, and I don't know how much ammo I had wasted. I quickly loaded a fresh mag into my Glock, shoving it back into its holster. The mag I had loaded into my rifle was windowed and showed me I had 11 rounds left. Yeah, I guess we were taking the suppressive part of suppressive fire very literally. I slapped a fresh mag into the rifle, and I thought to myself, all right, we're green on ammo. Next, Dwight, Isaac mumbled for the first time in what seemed like forever. I gazed up, my right hand tight on the rifle's grip as I looked him over. He sat, knees in his arms, eyes buried into his kneecaps, with his left arm extended, pointing at the operating table. "What's wrong, Isaac?" I asked. He said nothing, just his shaky finger pointing at the operating table. The booming sounds of whatever was trying to enter the hall continued as I glanced across it. Its chrome finish was still surprisingly intact and reflective, albeit with several spots showing age and rust. A black cushion on top with straps for, well, I don't want to think about it. And on top laid another paper, drawing side up. I walked over, my boots squeaking and crunching off the tile floor as I approached the table. It was a picture of this room at a different time, in a different place, facing from the back wall outwards towards the door. The girl was strapped onto the operating table, crying, with cuts and stitches all over her face. In the back corner of the room, there was a figure. The way it was drawn, it looked like TV static, but not at the same time. It was blurry, but I couldn't make out that it was a man, and it just stood there in the far corner, facing her. I ran my thumb along the corner of the paper and realized, through my light bleeding through it, that there was another drawing on the other side. Me. I stood there facing the now empty, torn up operating table, my rifle crudely drawn across my chest, headlamp illuminating the area around me in a triangle. I could see Isaac in the fetal position, just like he was in one of the corners, and that staticky, smeared, blurry man peering just over my shoulder. I then realized the banging on the door in the hallway had stopped. Before my synapses could even comprehend, the drawing was dropped. My selector switch was set on semi, and I had spun around to see her. Although this time it wasn't out of the corner of my eye like in the basement. She stood there, dress torn and now a dirty white, staring me down. A smile was pulled across her dead, cracked lips as she raised her head to look at me, with white, beady eyes surrounded by black, sunken rings. The last word I remember as my headlamp flickered off. Gotcha. I awoke to a cool breeze across my face. My head was pounding as I pulled a black fleece beanie from in front of my eyes. "Hey, Sergeant Knowles! Sergeant!" I rubbed my eyes. Black oil and dirt coated mechanic's gloves that I'd worn for probably my entire tenure gripped at the steering wheel of the truck that I was in. I looked out the windshield. We were inside the wire of a large camp. Why were we here? It started to leak back from a long-forgotten memory. A near 500-mile patrol that had taken almost 2 days across the province We were low on everything, from rounds to fuel to water to MREs. So we were bedded down in the motor pool of our halfway point compound for the night. But that was almost a decade ago, so why was I here? "Sergeant!" My eyes shot to just outside the door. A kid in gray digital camo gear, with a worn shamag scarf wrapped around his neck. I remembered this kid. 5'5", stocky. My Bravo team leader had a sick sense of humor and made him a saw gunner. "What is it, Davies?" I asked. "Sergeant Walker wanted to speak with you. He's by the tower." Sergeant Walker. My old platoon sergeant. "All right, go get some sleep," I told him. He shuffled back to his ruck and whoopee, and he was passed out before I grabbed my M16 and dropped out of the truck. Around us, beige armored vehicles laid silent and still, and the entire area was coated in a thick layer of frost, which is not unusual for Afghanistan. If I was right, it was the middle of winter. Sergeant Walker was up on a catwalk, positioned by a cylinder guard tower on the northern side of the compound. The entire area was maybe 100 by 100 meters, tucked on the edge of a mountain, which made it a great target for snipers and RPGs. All of this just showed the size of Walker's brass balls, I guess. I mean, he was just standing there, M16 slung on his front, staring off into the distant mountains with a pair of binoculars. He barely said anything as I stomped up the metal stairs and stood alongside him. "Sergeant," I said. "Nolan, mornin'." He had a thick Georgian accent from the deep south. The man was a very tall man, built like a brick house. The kind of man you needed to lead a group of soldiers in a war zone. A puff of hot air escaped my lips as I exhaled, gazing out at the dark horizon. "Playing chicken games with the snipers again, Sergeant," I said. A small huff, a chuckle. It was very rare from him. "We've been doing all that for months now, Nolan. It catches us all." I looked at my watch. 01:35, 22nd of December, 2010. 7 months into my 4th deployment. 3 months after. "You wanted to see me," I said. I watched as hot air seemed to spew out from beneath Sergeant Walker's Kevlar like smoke coming from a dragon's nostrils. "We nearly got hit on that bend coming in. Second squad all right?" I scratched the back of my neck, between my helmet straps. "Yeah, I sent the guys to bed early. Did all the SI and the vehicle checks myself." We stood in silence for a few minutes, but it felt like hours, just staring out, watching the mountains. Walker sighed, shaking his head, and looked back into the binos. "I'm sorry about Clancy," he said. I raised an eyebrow. This wasn't something he usually talked about. Straight to the point, no dilly-dallying about the past losses or events. "No rest for the wicked," he said. "We've been losing guys and it's not our fault. Just a bad hand, Nolan. First they won't give us the Rhino to protect against IEDs. Then it's bad intel leading us into contact after contact." Walker shook his head. "But Clancy was on me. I should have done better scanning after we got hit. I know I don't usually talk like this, but that's been burning in my mind for months now." I buried my hands in my pockets, an act vilified in garrison. But out here, not so much. "So like you said, Sergeant, bad hand," I said. "A bad hand. Yeah. A platoon fed into a meat grinder for months on end, with the seeming intent to get us all killed. Bad hand, yeah. Gotta make do with what you got." Maybe when this is all over, we can move on, hopefully. But right now, you need to play your hand and wake up, Dwight. Dwight. He's never called me by my first name before. What did you say, Sergeant? I asked. Walker dropped his binoculars, his hazel eyes staring down at me as he let them hang around his neck. Dwight, wake up. The past faded away as I woke up face first on a metal floor, my head pounding. The area around me had a sort of orange glow as I opened my eyes. I noticed strange, ornate candelabras standing in rows against the far metal walls. The ground tasted like dirt and iron from the red rust covering it. At least I hope that it was red rust. Dwight! Roseanne's voice, distant and wavy, shouted from behind me. Dwight! I drove my right hand into the ground, pushing myself onto a knee. My rifle was laid on the ground in front of me, and my kit hung ragged and disheveled as if something had tried to pull it off me. Roseanne stood there with her. The girl with the sunken eyes held an iron grip so tight that Roseanne, a fully grown woman much taller than her, struggled to get out of her grip. Dwight! Roseanne shouted, waving at me with her free hand. I gritted my teeth, raising my right hand as my left hand grasped my temple, trying to ease the pain. Roseanne waved her hand and pointed behind her. The effigy! The effigy! Shoot it! She screamed. I blinked my eyes, trying to focus on what lay behind her. The operating table from before. But now, at the back of a wide room, the size of a small gymnasium. Where were we? I don't know. But I could see that it had some sort of object on it, made of twigs, twine, and her own ripped up and bloodied pink and white dress wrapped around it. I haven't asked Roseanne, but I wondered, and still wonder, what kind of voodoo this is. Paganism, something from the Middle East, witchcraft. My soldier's calculus didn't ask this though. It just knew what it had to do. Shoot it, Dwight! She screamed again. Shoot. Somewhere deep down, I laughed, hearing how she needed my way of doing things. But laughing would have to wait. My right hand shot to my thigh, pulling out my Glock, and I took aim. 3 shots, aimed with precision at the operating table that was maybe 20 meters away. They barely got 10 meters as they hit some sort of invisible field, crushing them as if they'd hit an Abrams head-on. They fell straight down against the floor. The barrier now rippled like the surface of a lake, but even through the murky, wavy field, I could see her, smiling, laughing, gripping Roseanne's hand tight, knowing we've been duped. I fired again. The slide shot back. A 9mm round shot out, and it was once again crushed against the barrier. Rounds couldn't get through, so what could? I gazed around, looking for something, anything. That's when a set of footsteps running at me caused me to turn. It was Isaac. Up until now, I hadn't thought about where he'd been, but there he was, running full force at me, arms outstretched, eyes sunken, white, and beady. His growl was inhuman and rabid as he rammed into me. I was still on a knee and feeling like I barely knew what was happening. He managed to force me, a man who had not only size, but probably weight and fighting skills on him, into the barrier. And boy, did it sting. It felt like touching the surface of a grill, but instead of only just the metal bars, it was an entire flat surface, burning through my skin, my clothes, my hair. I yelled out, for the first time in a long time, out of instinct. Isaac, or whatever had taken hold, was now digging his heels in to shove me into it. My mind raced, under siege by pain, by anxiety, by fear, by anger, by adrenaline, searching for an order, for a goal. My mind raced. 16 years of fighting, of combat, of being a soldier, and then a soldier for hire, then a civil servant, all coming to an end. Here, overwhelmed by darkness, failing to protect those that I signed up and swore to protect, allowing the darkness to overtake an entire family, dragging my friends down with me. I searched for my name, Dwight Nolan, former U.S. Staff Sergeant. 4 tours in the Middle East, having seen more of Afghanistan than my own home. No, I was not going down like this. Too many battles, too much fighting to succumb to this. Dwight, fight back! Roseanne's voice bellowed from beyond the barrier. All the training, all the animalistic instinct to fight the evils of my country, now to fight the evils of existence itself, came rushing to the surface. I roared, meeting Isaac's own rabid state of mind with that of my own will to not die. I grappled, scrambled, shoving his arms from my shoulders and slamming my head into his, forcing him back. My hand reached for my Glock, but it wasn't there. It was on the floor. A quick dive, 2 shots to his... No, I stopped myself. Isaac is my friend. He's been with me for this entire ordeal. I'm not going to stab him in the back. Leave him to this. No matter how messed up this is all getting. No time for sentiment as Isaac came lunging in again. If he was going high, fine. I ducked down and grabbed Isaac around his waist, picking him up and Matt Hughes style running and slamming him into the ground. Forcing him on his back, I gazed into his eyes. They were wide, full of rage, of a rabid frenzy. His mouth foamed, and black ooze leaked from beneath his makeshift eye patch. "I kill you!" Isaac roared as he clawed at my face, his fingers digging into the scar on my right cheek. Anger rose to the surface as my fist balled up and slammed into his nose. His head bounced off the floor. But whatever possessed him obviously didn't care about concussions as he just sat up again. Our scrap continued as Isaac forced us both back to our feet. Now he was trying to bite down onto my shoulder. I shoved him off, kicking out one of his legs. And seeing we were now approaching one of the walls, I ran in. And this time I tackled Isaac into the steel surface. Our probably collective 350 pounds caused the metal in whatever labyrinth we were in to groan as we connected. I kicked out one of Isaac's legs and shoved him into a row of candelabras. Oil and wax splashed out as they dominoed down with him towards the barrier. I backed off, shielding my face. Then I saw it. As the fiery oil splashed out, it passed right through the barrier, seemingly untouched. Rounds couldn't go through it, but fire did. Fire, was that it? I stood there, baffled, not even caring about Isaac as he riffed. But how was I going to use fire? I looked down at Isaac, and then it hit me. On his gun belt, aside from all the pouches of slugs and buckshot, the one on the back, the one marked in red and black, yes. "Kill you! Kill you!" Isaac said as he scrambled to his feet, stumbling over candelabra stands as he lunged at me. I underhookered him, and inhuman levels of strength allowed Isaac to battle me. But I had a few tricks up my sleeve that his feral mind didn't. Slipping around to his back, I kicked out one of his knees, and I wrapped my left arm around his neck, allowing me to control him for now. We were now both on our knees. I quickly looked him up and down. Thank God his Mossberg was in its sling. What a gigantic horseshoe I must have had up my ass for it not to have gone off in the scuffle. I pulled the Mossberg off and slipped it between the bent part of my right leg, a tactic used to reload rifles. But I think I could have been forgiven for this makeshift use of the tactic given the circumstances. My right hand fumbled with the clip on the mole pouch. Isaac's hand dug into my arm. With just a t-shirt on, he scratched at the skin. I bit down the pain and anxiety and focused on the will to push on. I opened the pouch and dug out a very specific shotgun slug. A golden brass top with a bright orange body. Dang ink 12 gauge. Dragon's breath. Isaac growled and screamed through his foamed-over mouth as I fumbled with the Mossberg. With all of Isaac's thrashing, simply shoving it into the weapon was 1,000 times harder. Once it clicked in, I pulled the gun up by its fore end and shook it up and down, racking the slug. Holding Isaac close in that hold, I raised the shotgun up with my right hand, feeling like a bad action hero. But given the circumstances, the laws of conventional tactics are now out the window. I took aim. I guesstimated 20 meters. Dragon's breath should have a minimum range of 30. Let's hope I was right. I pulled the trigger. Even if it had no real recoil, the pillar of fire and sparks spewed from the muzzle of the shotgun. The entire center of the back wall, where the operating table was, became engulfed in hellfire, unlike anything these demons had probably ever seen. The Mossberg dropped from my right hand as I underhooked Isaac's right arm, and I gazed over at Roseanne and the girl. Roseanne had successfully escaped her grasp, mostly because she had let go. She stared at the operating table and then back at me in horror, her sunken, lifeless, evil eyes now showing a very lively, very fearful stare. Fear on the face of those that are supposed to go bump in the night, the creatures that have plagued this place for a while. This was more definitive than the backyard. It felt right. Pure, like an actual victory. The effigy began to hiss and spark, and as I held onto Isaac, all I could mouth to the entity, the girl, was one word: gotcha. As quick as I blinked my eyes, I found myself seated in the rolling chair in my security room. Immediately, I jumped up and looked around. Everything was just as it had been. My leather jacket over the back of the chair, rifle and plate carrier against the wall, all the monitors showing their proper views. I swung open the door. This time, there were no power outages or mysterious libraries staring at me. "Isaac! Roseanne! John!" I screamed. I looked around. Isaac was passed out on the couch, hat covering his face. Roseanne turned in her chair towards me, a confused expression on her face. "Dwight, are you all right?" I was speechless. I looked up. The afternoon sunlight was pouring through the windows. Heavy snow built up at the edges. Something in me finally clicked. I stormed over to the couch, knocking Isaac's cap off with my left hand. I then slapped him across the face with my right hand, which gripped my Glock. What, Dwight?" Isaac asked, confused, rubbing his face. He let out a dry burp as he stood up, and I backed off. "Are you possessed?" I asked, though my words seemed not to click with him. "What?" he said. I stared down at him with a vengeance. "Are you possessed?" I hissed. Isaac noticed my hand on my gun, and he held his hands up in surrender. "Man, I know I have my demons, you know, alcoholism and stuff, but they ain't gonna kill you. Although some liquid courage might ease your nerves," he said. A hand on my shoulder caused me to jump, backing up against the stairwell banister. Roseanne held up her hands. "Dwight, it's over, all right?" However, I'm sad to say, it's not. We regrouped, reassessed, went over what had happened. About 23 hours have passed, and while Roseanne and I know what happened, Isaac barely does. There are no burn marks on my back, none on Isaac. John, however, is still gone. I searched every nook and cranny, but the kid is gone. However, Roseanne says she might have a solution. After spending time with that thing, wherever we were for those short 23 hours. She's gone outside now. She says she needs to be in tune with the earth. I guess that explains her conservatory level of plants in her house. We've been gone for a few days, so I hope she fed and watered them in advance. Isaac said he doesn't know what happened, but I'm not gonna be so quick to let him off the hook. Whether intentional or not, I don't know the full extent of what happened. I've barely had an hour or so to process everything, from those weird-ass rooms to the things to, well, the dream. I've barely had enough time to really get a grasp, and it doesn't look like I'll be getting anytime soon either. A van just pulled up to the gate, and a very familiar, stocky European man waddled out of the snow up to the intercom.
Hello. Is this the Cazamoth Estate? We've got an order for you. You ordered a small armory.
Said,
Come, let us
"I've
in."
got to go. I've got to sort out how much Gulf War Lend-Lease Isaac purchased from these guys. Afterwards, we need to regroup again with Roseanne and decide what to do next. John is, like I said, still missing, and he's out there with whatever the source. It's time to end this. This is Dwight Nolan signing off. We'll be back.